Good morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for some more Anne Frank. Please turn in your books to page 525. Okay, we're on page 525. Mr. Van Daan, Dirk's in luck to get a girl who can bake like this. Remember, Miep had taken them cake. Miep, putting down her empty teacup. I have to run. Dirk's taking me to a party tonight. Anne, oh, how heavenly. Remember now what everyone is wearing and what you have to eat and everything so you can tell us tomorrow. I'll give you a full report. Goodbye, everyone. Mr. Van Daan, Miep, just a minute. There's something that I'd like you to do for us. He hurries up the stairs to his room. Mrs. Van Daan sharply, Pootie, where are you going? She rushes up the stairs after him, calling hysterically, What do you want, Pootie? What are you going to do? Miep to Peter, what's wrong? Peter, his sympathy is with his mother. Father says he's going to sell her fur coat. She's crazy about that old fur coat. Dussel, is it possible? Is it possible that anyone is so silly as to worry about a fur coat in times like this? Peter, it's none of your darn business. And if you say one more thing, I'll take you and I mean it. There is a piercing scream from Mrs. Van Daan above, and she grabs at the fur coat as Mr. Van Daan is starting down the stairs with it. No, 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 don't you dare take that, you hear? It's mine. Downstairs, Peter turns away, embarrassed and miserable. My father gave me that. You didn't give it to me. You have no right. Let go of it. You hear? Mr. Van Daan pulls the coat from her hands and hurries downstairs. Mrs. Van Daan sinks to the floor, sobbing, as Mr. Van Daan comes into the main room and the others look away, embarrassed for him. Mr. Van Daan and Mr. Kraler, just a little discussion over the advisability of selling this coat. As I have often reminded Mrs. Van Daan, it's very selfish of her to keep it when people outside are in such desperate need of clothing. He gives the coat to Miep. So if you will, please, to sell it for us, it should fetch a good price. And by the way, will you get me cigarettes? I don't care what kind they are. Get all you can. So he's willing to sell his wife's fur coat and so that he can get some cigarettes. And he's also the one that was sneaking in and stealing food. Remember. Okay? Miep, it's terribly difficult to get them, Mr. Van Daan, but I'll try. Goodbye. She goes. Mr. Frank follows her down the steps to bolt the door after her, and Mr. Frank gives Mr. Kraler a cup of tea. Are you sure that you won't have some cake, Mr. Kraler? I'd better not. You're not feeling badly. What does your doctor say? Or you're still feeling badly? Question from Mr. Van Daan. What does your doctor say? I haven't been to him. Now, Mr. Kraler. Mr. Kraler sitting at the table. Oh, I tried, but you can't get near a doctor these days. They're so busy. After weeks, I finally managed to get one on the telephone, and I told him that I'd like an appointment. I wasn't feeling very well. You know what he answers over the telephone? Stick out your tongue. They laugh. He turns to Mr. Frank, and Mr. Frank comes back. I have some contracts here. I wonder if you'd look over them for me. Mr. Frank putting out his hand. Of course. Mr. Kraler, he rises. If we could go downstairs. Mr. Frank starts ahead, and Mr. Kraler speaks to the others. Will you forgive us? I won't keep him but a minute. He starts to follow Mr. Frank down the steps. Margot, with a sense of foreboding, meaning she knows something's up. There's a problem here. What's happened? Something's happened, hasn't it, Mr. Kraler? Mr. Kraler stops and comes back, trying to reassure Margot with a pretense of casualness. No, really, I want your father's advice. Something's gone wrong. I know it. Mr. Frank coming back to Mr. Kraler. If it's something that concerns us here, it's better that we all hear it. Mr. Kraler turning to him quietly, but the children. What they'd imagine would be worse than any reality. As Mr. Kraler speaks, they all listen with intense apprehension. Mr. Van Daan comes down the stairs and sits on the bottom step. Mr. Kraler, it's a man in the storeroom. I don't know whether or not you remember him. Carl, about 50, heavy-set, nearsighted. He came with us before you left. He was from Utrecht? Yes, that's the man. A couple of weeks ago, when I was in the storeroom, he closed the door and he asked, "How's Mr. Frank? What do you hear from Mr. Frank?" I told him I only knew there was a rumor that you were in Switzerland. He said he'd heard that rumor too, but he thought I might know something more. I didn't pay any attention to it, but then a thing happened yesterday. He brought me some invoices to the office for me to sign. And as I was going through them, I looked up and he was standing, staring at the bookcase, your bookcase. He said he thought he remembered a door there. Wasn't there a door there that used to go up to the loft? And then he told me that he wanted more money, 20 guilders more a week.